Cinematography has visibly shown what experiences African Americans have gone through in a variety of ways. Various different movies have shown trials, tribulations, and overcoming the hardships African Americans have had to face. Movies such as Malcolm X, Ali, and 42 have highlighted key figures in the movement for equality in America for this group. And although some of the scenes show racism, hate, and discrimination for the African American group, there always seems to be a little bit of hope in the end of the movies. One movie that really captures a key figure in the movement of civil rights and also shows what awful treatment people such as African Americans had to go through in order to simply gain equality in places like the South is the movie Selma. Selma is a 2014 film that shows the fight in Alabama led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., played by David Oyelowo, to secure African Americans' right to vote by leading a peaceful march from Selma to Montgomery, which is about a 16-hour walk. The distance of the walk wasn't the only difficult thing about the walk. For King and his followers, peace was the way to gain respect and equality by making the walk very dangerous due to the fact others, specifically white people and white law enforcement in the South, didn't approve of the march and wanted to show that via violence. The movie captured this violence when on March 7, 1965, the 600 marchers were met on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and attacked by the local law enforcement with billy clubs and tear gas. This day would be remembered as Bloody Sunday. Other tactics used by lawmen at the time were to arrest Martin Luther King Jr. and some of his followers despite them not actually breaking law. More so, they did things legally that the lawmen didn't support due to their racist views, therefore causing them to be arrested to try and slow down the movement. This film highlighted the struggle that lead character Martin Luther King Jr. faced as the peaceful leader of this movement. It showed him being targeted because he was a well-known name and still having to charge the fight while being peaceful, when at times it seemed that no progress would be made. It showed his struggles in jail where he had to be away from his wife and his fellow marchers. Yet, despite all the violence employed to stop the movement, King and his followers sparked enough through their demonstration to force President Lyndon B. Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act of 1965, showing that despite violence and struggle, perseverance can cause positive change. Major societal issues highlighted in Selma are lack of civil rights, discrimination, police brutality, and racism expressed in many forms. All of these are met by Dr. King by peaceful, relentless, and ultimately showing the constant demonstrating done by this group got them the goal they had in mind. Being arrested could have caused King to give up, but he didn't. Being violently beaten could have also caused this group to use violence back or give up, yet they stuck to their values and didn't give up. Equality by law is somewhat listed in Selma that shows that what's on paper doesn't always matter when the people enforcing the laws don't agree with them. Letting racism be more than law is what caused the violence from the police. Some of these issues are still relevant today. We see police brutality, and also we see things such as African American groups being targeted by neo-Nazis, such as what we saw in the Vice video. Fear, racism, and belittlement of African Americans are used by these groups. Also, an underlying theme not mentioned in the movie but is relevant is the naming of landmarks. We see violence today by race groups over the naming of landmarks of racist people, and ironically, the Bloody Sunday Bridge, named the Edmund Pettus Bridge, is named after a Democratic senator in Alabama and also a former leader of the Confederate Army, bringing up the case that should we name national historical monuments after racist people? That is a question we face today. Selma, in my opinion, was a great film. It showed one of the main struggles and victories of the civil rights movement, and it highlighted the most well-known leader of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr. It showed King not only as a strong leader, but also a man who was emotional, a man who felt the weight of an entire race on his shoulders, and showed the struggle he faced personally. Selma showed a tough scene of violence and pain, which is important, I think, so people can feel the pain and relate the best way possible. Selma also leads to good conversation, which I had with many people I watched the movie with. The movie contributed to African Americans' experience in the United States by showing examples of peaceful protest and what progress has been made, and what progress still needs to be made. It is an iconic film for their culture because, first off, it has lead roles by many African Americans, which is important in gaining equality today. Also, it shows the efforts of Martin Luther King Jr., who is very inspiring and well known in his community and all over the world. Selma also has had relevance to plenty of the lectures we have had in class, especially as of late. In our class lectures over the LA riots and the LA 92 video we watched, along with the lectures over civil rights, we saw the law letting officers get away with racial violence today and in the 1980s, just as they did in the 1960s. This in-class lecture highlighted all because it is on paper as law doesn't make it relevant if the people enforcing the law have no regard for the law. In Module 3, the African American Experience, we saw plenty of other connections in the lectures. An example of this is the resistance to slavery video and reading we discussed in class. In Selma and in the 1960s, slavery was abolished, but racism and discrimination was plenty relevant, and so resistance by African Americans was active. Whether it was slavery or Jim Crow laws, not being able to vote, and being mistreated, African Americans showed that they will fight back and resist once things get to a certain point, and they unite. Finally, our video and class lecture, Eyes on the Prize Part 1, showed some very similar issues that we see in Selma. Civil rights, we learned in the video, saw a revival and awakening in the 1950s, which sparked the ability for King and his group to even be able to march for the right to vote in 1965. Without having the awakening, there would be no fight for things like the right to vote, and the initial spark of equality allowed for civil rights movement to gain progress. I learned a lot about how to look at different things groups other than mine have to go through, and I've also learned to be more aware about my treatment of others along with stopping others mistreating people different from our own. I learned a lot from the lectures, the movie Selma, and taking American Ethnic Studies, and I'm glad I was able to take it.